Brilliant, thank you.
Okay, and I already put it in. Okay. Carry away.
Okay. Hello again, my name is Macy. I work for Communication Services for the Deaf. I was actually in the same seats y'all were about a year ago. Yeah. I was in an internship actually this past January. Had enough of Lent, so bailed. Just kidding.
So she got a really good job offer because she volunteered for Trey, who came here to talk to their class about something else.
Wow.
So he hired her.
Yeah, it's been a really great fit actually. So, so my company, we schedule interpreters, interpreting agencies. So surely when you are certified, you can come sign up with us and get contracted and work for us. I know, that's probably enough background information. So I just brought some stuff to, so I didn't really think this out through my head. I get really nervous, so just letting you all know. It's the more I drove here, the more nervous I got. But okay, so anyway, just gonna give you a day in the life and just a rundown. Then I went through some stuff that might be important for you to know, and then questions if you have them. And then, true Lynn fashion, we have activities and handouts. So, I guess we can start.
What does your job look like?
My job, so we schedule nationally. I recently was moved into Texas scheduling, so you'll probably actually, if you do sign up with CST, you'll probably be interacting with me a lot more. But so basically what I do is we take in requests for all over the place, all different kinds of jobs, and then we have to in turn find a qualified good fit interpreter for each and every request.
Is that statewide or just for us?
So my company, we are actually everywhere, but specifically I'm talking about Texas. And so what that kind of looks like is we have a couple of staff interpreters, but most of, I would say 98% of the interpreters we have are the contractors. So basically we are kind of the middleman in between the companies and deaf consumers who need the appointments set up, and then the interpreters. So train of thought, I definitely had something there. Anyway, so basically that's what happens. We get requests in, people call in, they send in emails, and then we set up the request, kind of take some information that we need, and then send that out. And so what that kind of looks like on an interpreter at independent contractors, and there is, we send out jobs, requests to you guys and the interpreters, and then there's kind of some different ways we do that, so I'll talk about kind of how we page. Generally, we do it in 4 different ways. There's requests for specific interpreters. So a lot of times, deaf consumers will ask for specific interpreters to be requested. So they will provide us usually, then they'll give us that information when they make the request. So we'll either request for you, and then we have a request for you and others. So if maybe you're on a preferred interpreter list, or good fit for the deaf consumer, and then we also have just kind of offers. Which can be anything from offering it to 1 or 2 interpreters who we think would be a good fit or generally thrive in that specific type of environment or request, the nature of the request, I guess. And then it can be, up to anything like mass paging. So that's kind of what that looks like. We do get requests for all kinds of things. So we contract with the state. We do a lot of medical requests, but we do, things for the government, platform interpreting, education, performances. We do employment, interviews, trainings, all those kinds of things. We have fun community stuff. City of Austin does some games, things like that. So kind of a very, very, very broad spectrum. And I would highly recommend that you get into everything and try everything at least once, because you'd be surprised at the things that you like and didn't know. So anyway, we get a lot of interpreters who go on stuff, come back, and they just had such a great time, and they didn't know about it before. So anyway, I would just, to kind of see what you're interested in, take a whole bunch of things that you can on all spectrums. And we also do mental health. Legal, thank you. Yes, definitely legal. Those are fun. So that is kind of what paging looks like. And then also we can send pages through, usually through email, but also, sometimes just to call interpreters and kind of see if maybe there's ongoing requests or stuff. So, so what it looks like after. Okay, so generally here's what'll happen. We will get a request. We get all the information, as much as they can give to us, and then when we send it out to you, in order to be compliant, HIPAA compliant, we send you the very littlest amount that we can give you in order to make a decision. So what that looks like is date, time, the general nature of the request. So it'll look like medical, mental health, employment, and usually that's pretty much all we'll give you. And then also a general location. So Round Rock, Kyle, North Austin, South Austin, and that's pretty much it. And so kind of the screening process there is if that works for you, then generally interpreters will call in, say that they're available, and then that's when we provide them with the job information. Then that is where you get all the information. That's when you can kind of see the deaf consumer. Usually you'd want to look and check and make sure that there's no conflicts of interest. You'd want to let your agency know right away if there is. And then you kind of get some details on the job and what specifically is going to be happening. If it's employment, was it an interview, was it training, conferences that are going on, that kind of stuff. So that's kind of how that looks for an interpreter. You basically get offered out just enough to make a decision, and then from there you can kind of, so if generally you don't do well in mental health or don't like it, that would be something you probably wouldn't want to. Sometimes interpreters will call in and just say, can you give me just a little information, maybe just kind of more specifically. For example, I had an interpreter call me the other day. We'd sent out something as employment, and she wanted to know, or he wanted to know if, dang it, I was thinking about it, we were talking the other day and I didn't mention, anyway, it was good. Anyway, the interpreter called back and asked what it was because this interpreter was a basic level certified interpreter and they didn't feel comfortable doing things like interviews but would be willing to do trainings. So that happens too, and I really highly recommend, it's really good on your part and on our part, and kind of really helps with any confusion. If you have any doubts, just call and they'll kind of help you figure out if it's an appropriate fit for you or not. So kind of going off track here, but this is your business. It's probably a good way to think about being an independent contractor. So you're not only representing the agency that you're contracting with, but also yourself as an interpreter and in the community. So I think it's really important to try and be as thorough and efficient and follow through and really just take it on, not as just, a job where you're taking work, but really make it your own, I'll get back to that. But anyway, just a good mindset is to kind of think of this as your own business, and it's very self-reflective, and it's also reflective on who you're contracting with. And it is amazing what a teeny tiny little world the deaf community is, and what gets around in there. So if you ever think maybe someone will hear about it, they probably have already. So back to my paging. Getting work back is something that definitely happens. I would say it's probably pretty important that you try not to give back a lot of jobs. Even if, it's always something that seems really important or something that isn't avoidable, just know, even if your reasons are always valid, if you are someone who's always giving stuff back, it gets noticed. For example, you take on a job, you see who the deaf consumer is, it's your best friend's mom, call back, hey, I'm Karen, conflict of interest, can't do it. That's fine, that kind of stuff happens. If something does come up, that's not to say agencies aren't forgiving or we aren't human, things happen, so that's fine. But you just kind of want to make sure that if you are getting something back, you've really done everything that you can up to that point to try and make it work. Just because it kind of creates an all-around scramble, and it just doesn't really leave a too terribly good impression if you're one of those interpreters who are always calling back and or I can't go, or I can't do this. Exhaust all your options. If your tire's flat, do you maybe have a friend who can take you? Can you call a taxi service, a cab? If not, okay, then call us back, let us know. That kind of thing.
Let me just say that a lot of your decisions need to be long-term decisions. So, right, you may pay a little bit more for the cab than you would actually earn, but at least you stay in the good graces of the agency, who will give you work for a long time to come. So it may be worth paying for the taxi one time, then worrying about your car later, just so you don't give work back.
And punctuality. I think that should be on your list there, but being on time is so important. And it's so important. If example, we have an interpreter who, for some reason, cannot make it to early morning jobs. I don't know what has been happening, but a lot of coming in late to early morning jobs. So that interpreter no longer gets offered anything early morning, anything before 10.
Which is a lot of work.
A lot, yes. A lot of stuff happens in the morning. Honestly, get there 30 minutes early, especially if this is your first time going to something. Look it up, figure out where the parking is. I know I'm echoing Lynn here. But you want to do your research and figure out where it is, where you can park, maybe call ahead if you need to. But it's just really, really, really important that you are prompt and there. And again, if you're looking at it as your own business, you really want that positive reflection on you and with the agency as well. So please do your best always to be if you're going to be late, if there's something that you couldn't help, maybe there's a wreck or you're stuck in traffic, you would want to maybe call someone and let them know. So always CYA as much as you can. Call them, let them know. That way we can notify the business, let the deaf consumer know. So there's that. Let's see. Kind of covered that. Okay, so feedback after a job. Generally, you'd want to provide feedback if you think it's something that the agency needs to know. So if you show up and the deaf consumer prefers only black for that interpreter, or they are sensitive to smell, they don't want a lot of perfume, or they get there and it turns out you thought it was a medical job and you get there and there's some mental health issues that maybe the doctor's office isn't notifying us about. It's kind of hard to have a hard set rule list, but really if you were an interpreter and you were going into a job, you would want to provide feedback that you would want to get going into that kind of job, if that makes sense. Otherwise, it doesn't. You don't really have to send in long personal stories or give feedback about everything or who you liked, what you didn't. Really, try just to be professional. You want to just kind of hit on things that are needed, if anything, because there are a lot of jobs that you don't even really need to provide feedback for. And your agencies will show you how to give them the feedback, or you just call in and let them know. For feedback, just make sure that it's something. I think a good rule of thumb would be if you would want to know going into the job, then maybe give that as well. Or if it's something that an interpreter would need to know going into the job, that kind of feedback, that would be something to provide to your agencies. And this is really important so that we can pass that along and make note of it, and when we're scheduling, we can keep that in mind later too. So
yeah, I just did a job for you guys where I had to call in and say the next interpreter needs to have safety shoes. They wouldn't be let in if they didn't have safety shoes.
Yeah, really. Okay, so fun story. Oh my gosh, that's another thing too. Interpreters have really great stories. But so here's one. There was an emergency need that I sent an interpreter to, and they were there for emergency requests can be kind of long. So anyway, there for a couple of hours, had a replacement on the way, and the interpreter called and let me know whoever you're sending next, it's going to have to be a female. So it turns out that the patient had some sexual issues, and there was a lot of touching involved. So something like that, you want to let them know, because, of course, I had a male interpreter on the way to replace them. So I had to call, let them know, maybe not a good suit for you, let me find someone else. So, anyway, that's just a little fun story. It could have been even funnier, but I don't know what I can really even say. PG, but anyway, so that is really important stuff.
Practically, let me just ask you, how does payment work out when that happens?
So that kind of, usually if it's kind of a confirmation thing, the interpreter wouldn't bill, and we wouldn't either. So I guess maybe that's another thing too to talk about. It depends on the policies that are set up. Generally, statewide, Texas, I believe, at least through our agency, is 24-hour cancellation. So we go based on that. We have a code that we can mark things cancel upon arrival, and then we also have a cancel upon confirmation. And so the difference between those two is if you are scheduled for an appointment, you show up, deaf consumer doesn't show up, and you you get excused or get to leave, so that you would get to bill in full for. If, for example, you're getting called out, this generally happens for emergency stuff, but it can happen for pre-scheduled appointments too. If we were to call an interpreter, send them on a job, and then call them back, as close to right away as we can, and let them know it's been canceled. A lot of times it happens with emergency situations. You call to confirm the interpreter, and they tell you they don't need one anymore, and then you have to call the interpreter back. Generally, for that, interpreters, well, I don't want to say interpreters, we would ask the interpreter not to bill. And then, things like weather, which, Texas really only experiences summers and then not as hot of summers. But so when I'm supporting states like South Dakota, North Dakota, Minnesota up there, they have a lot of, canceled due to weather, or even maybe flooding and stuff. That is generally up to the interpreters to decide if they want to bill or not. I would just say keep in mind things happen, and sometimes they're unavoidable, so...
Can I just ask if this triangle is right? So the interpreter would bill the business or the company. They would bill your agency, and then the agency would pay the interpreter?
Right, so basically you are billing us and we are paying you. And then we are billing the facility or whatever the requesting business was, and then they're paying us.
So they're the middleman.
I was going to say the agency is the middleman, right?
Right.
The agency is your customer.
Okay. So when you say you're asking the interpreter not to bill, you're asking the interpreter not to bill you, so you won't bill the business?
Right.
And if that happens, are there many conflicts with the businesses trying to get the money from them because you've cancelled?
So with the businesses, yeah, generally there is. For interpreters, it's within your rights to bill, technically, so if you decide to do that, then that's what happens, and then everything else happens on our end if we bill or not.
Have you gotten in controversies before? If someone's like, "No, you told me not to bill, but I demand that I should bill," and
yeah, oh yeah. Well, because we would never tell you not to bill unless you're not within your rights to bill. So we would suggest, but usually we just kind of ask the interpreters, and then they just kind of get it. I think that's also something too you pick up with a lot of experience. If you get up into your car, and if there's bad weather happening, and you get up and you actually go, and then the deaf consumer were to cancel because of the weather, that I would think, man, you took all the time, you got ready for the job, you got up and went, that you're probably within your rights to bill, we'd probably still bill too. But, if you knew it was kind of bad, and you called ahead of time, and you're not really sure, and then it's just really, it's all situational, but...
So how does billing work? After the end of my assignment, do I, present a piece of paper and say I need your signature so I can bill, or say I'll email you later for your 2 hours for $100 or something like that? How does billing itself actually work?
So I can really only speak for CSD, but we use a scheduling system online, and you go in and you can submit your invoice that way. A lot of interpreters keep their own invoices too. A little side note, maybe hint for you guys. Sometimes, some companies you submit invoices to, some you don't. We don't anymore, but we used to. We still recommend interpreters if you want to keep your own copies of your own invoices, which I think is a really good idea. Then you can kind of compare and see, and that just kind of keeps you, on your game. But as far as that goes, usually there is a minimum. So Texas is kind of funky. There is an hour minimum scheduling, and then also we do an hour admin fee. So it's supposed to cover a 30-minute travel time on either side type of situation. Other states I support have a 2-hour minimum. So everything bills at 2 hours. So a 15-minute appointment, we're billing 2 hours.
But no travel.
Right, no travel. Unless you're going too far or something. So every state kind of has their own policies, and I think within agencies too, it can even differ a little, but generally that's how that works. Did I answer your question? I don't know.
A little bit. It's just kind of, we are assigned with mentors, and my mentor was kind of talking about when you're billing, each different assignment is kind of different. Was saying do you have to eat while you're there? Is your agency going to pay for your meal? Do you have to pay for parking while you're there? Is your agency going to pay for parking? Or are those just little minute things I can pay out of pocket? Is that fine? Does that differentiate between each job or each interpreter? Or does each interpreter, I know there's different levels of certification and life experience and all that to make someone more qualified than another, but is pay normally the same hire for an agency, does like person A get X amount, then person B gets Y amount? Is that always different?
So a couple of different answers there. So first, all interpreters, their pay obviously is different depending on their experience and that you set up with the agency. As far as things like that, it really just depends on the job, you know? So a lot of times we get requests that are all day, and they'll let us know if they're providing lunch or not. And then those kinds of details, same with
Or whether
parking.
you bill through lunch. Sometimes you can't even bill through lunch.
Right.
Sometimes you can.
Same for things like parking, if you have to pay for parking if you're at like a big event center or something all day. So really, first it kind of depends on the job, and then from there it depends on what the requesting organization is paying for, and then what you can work out with your agency. Because generally, most of those costs, the agency doesn't normally cost like a whole lot of, cover the costs of things like that. Normally, the business would. And so that information, usually once you accept the job and you get all the information, really good to follow up with your agency and ask. And if you ever have any questions, send it out. But definitely things like parking, paying for lunch if you can bill for lunch or not. Things like teams. If you have a team, usually that name should be provided to you. Hotel costs if you're traveling and staying overnight. But so typically, in my experience so far, it has been that the business requesting the interpreters, we generally ask them to do that. So.
As far as scheduling goes, is it mostly like one day out that you'll offer a job, or you like how does that all work?
It used to be 2 weeks out.
Like, do you just live like day by day and not know?
No, not when you were born.
So that again differs too on agencies. Texas is a beast. I'm gonna be totally honest. Texas, a lot of the things we do, I kid you not, and the hour that I spent at work before I got here, I got 4 requests for tomorrow. Less than 24-hour notice, right? So in other states, though, it schedules out. For example, I was scheduling in Maryland for a while, and that I had almost a month out. So what it should be is when requests come in, we should start working on them right away and then page them out accordingly. If you're requested or if you're a requested interpreter, generally you'll get that right away. It kind of depends. So now, currently, we're kind of in a little bit of both. We're working on getting scheduled out, but then also managing all the last minute that comes in. So it kind of depends on where you are and the agency and just the requests. But I'd say right now we're like 50-50. Just because, we're getting like lots of, need an interpreter for tomorrow. Need an interpreter for tomorrow. So. And also, really good advice when you're new, if you want to make a really good impression, don't disappear on Fridays. Throw that out there, fun fact. A lot of interpreters are nowhere to be found then, which is really hard for us. So, anyway.
I just wanted to speak to yours. There are agencies that require a signature. For TCSD requires it for county jobs, for certain county jobs. You have to get the signature of the medical provider for certain things. There are some out-of-state agencies that require signatures, don't they?
And we do too. We have some agencies that do too. ARC, they require signatures. But for us, there's only a handful of companies or businesses that require it. Other states, sometimes it's more, sometimes it's less. Some require it for emergency needs. So that kind of varies depending on the agency too. But yes, so we do have a couple of places that require it. And so that's fine. Let's go this way.
Okay. So I had a question about the paging. Is that in an email format, or how does that?
So it can be a little bit of both. Generally, we do email. The offers, I'd say that's probably how we do 80% of it. We do call as well, especially in like last minute needs, but generally that goes through email.
Do you have interpreters that work specifically from the hours of like 12 o'clock midnight through until 8 a.m. that are on call for any kinds of emergencies?
We do. So, fun fact, we're contracted with Seton, and we provide all of their needs, which is really fun when you are scheduling and you get to be on call overnight, and then they wake you up at 2 in the morning. And then I get to wake you guys up at 2 in the morning and send you. But yeah, so we do. We provide 24-hour services for some places. Generally, right now, those emergency needs are only though for medical, and then we also do like awesome police department stuff. So, yeah, most agencies provide emergency services. So,
What are the policies for billing for prep time? Are you allowed to do that, or is there like certain assignments? Like, say if you're going to be contracted for a play or something, you'd obviously need to prep for that. Would you be able to bill for prepping?
Sure. So for that, you can definitely contact your agency. That's probably something, if you were to ask me, I would go to the business and let them know it takes this much time to prep. Can the interpreter bill for any of that and kind of see? But generally, in most cases, no. But I still really highly recommend that everybody do prep work before all of your jobs.
Yeah.
Yes. You'll definitely thank yourself later. So
yeah.
But yeah, so I mean, if it's like a big thing or big performances, maybe like ACL, maybe the interpreters who are going to perform there, they get to bill because that's a lot of hours of prep time. But so for like medical stuff, or if you get the notes and you're doing a colonoscopy and you don't know what that is, and you go and you research and kind of figure that out, that's not generally something you bill for. So still really good to do though.
Kind of going back to what Lee was talking about overnight. Is there ever a situation, you said you're with y'all are contracted with Steve, where there's already an interpreter there, and then it's called for the need of another one, where the interpreter is having to do both until the other one shows up?
Generally, no. The business would request another interpreter for the other person. Now, I can't say, though, that an interpreter hasn't shown up at Seton and they've said, oh, we just got another one in, do you mind interpreting too? But in that case, I would definitely, let them know I'm willing to work with you as much as I can, and I definitely can help, if you feel comfortable doing that, but maybe to have the business know to request another interpreter. So really advocate for yourself, because that just gets really hard, and as a scheduler, I don't know that unless you tell me. And that also would be good feedback to provide to an agency, just to let you know this happened, they didn't call in another interpreter, because then that's something next time we speak with them, we can let them know. Hey, maybe a good idea if you ever get two, that you probably need one interpreter per deaf consumer, and not to split them, because it gets really tiring for the interpreter and whatnot. So,
Bill twice.
yeah, I would say it's probably technically two different requests. Yeah. Like that's really, I don't know if that happens. No one tells me because I'm not too familiar with any situations like that. But yeah, I mean, generally, if you get there and there's two people and you're interpreting for two, I would have the business know to request another interpreter and let the agency know, because if they don't, we can call back and let them know it's 2 appointments. But sometimes someone will come in and they'll have like 3 appointments back to back to back, or 2 appointments, and then an interpreter will interpret the whole time, but that's still the same person. Or siblings will come in, and so that normally bills as one. So if you come in, I've had a request where someone brought in 3 kids, and they were all just having doctor's appointments back to back to back, and I sent one interpreter, and they billed all of that as one job. So, but like an emergency situation like you were talking about, where you're going back and forth, that I would completely advocate for it too.
You ever have issues dealing with companies that are either unwilling to pay to provide a
I can't tell you how often I refer people to ADA.
Can't they be? Yeah, I was about to say, like, can they be sued?
Yes, they can. And I was actually scheduling a huge trial. Legal interpreters who were suing a facility for that, so that was fun. Yes, so I do run into that a lot, and it's really difficult to let them know the law and also not advocate for my company. So that's usually a really fun, interesting, sticky conversation to have. But yeah, that does happen a lot.
Yeah.
A lot.
Because my friend works at a doctor's office, and they were trying to get an interpreter, but they weren't willing to pay, so they were going to try to have me do it. And I was like, what? And they ended up not even getting an interpreter for it, but I don't know if the deaf consumer was aware that they could take any legal action against that. So.
Yeah, it's that whole thing. It kind of bums me out sometimes. But yeah, I've definitely taken calls from people. They started requesting, and then in the middle of it, they'll say, "So who's paying for this?" So yeah, but that does happen a lot, and it all around. I think more advocacy for that needs to be done in general for deaf consumers, letting them know that they're able to do something about it. For companies, letting them know that they should provide providing these services, just kind of all around. So,
Realize it's that big of an issue.
yeah. Yes.
Is there a process like for timing? Because like if a deaf client doesn't show up or they don't give the information, they don't inform the interpreter or the agency that they're not showing up to the appointment or whatever, is there a time limit that you have to wait as an interpreter before you leave?
Yes. And so we use a 20-minute for an hour appointment. Sometimes if it's a longer appointment, it'll be longer. And then in situations like that, I highly, highly, highly recommend if you are going to leave, if no one has shown up by that time, and that would be something too you want to check with if you partner with another agency or contract with them, because every agency can be different. But I would recommend if that happens, CYA again and have someone dismiss you from the job. You wouldn't want to just kind of leave unless there's really no one to talk to. But generally, yeah, if someone hasn't shown up within 20 minutes or so, we tell interpreters. Then they can go if they get dismissed. And then I would keep track of whoever dismisses, like their name. Then they're a real person. So.
So it's the company that's hired you is the one that is responsible for dismissing you. You're not saying necessarily call you and say, hey, the consumer hasn't shown up, is it our information? You have to get somebody from that job site specifically to say.
Right, and so, okay, so we say 20 minutes and then you can go if they haven't shown up in 20 minutes. And that's something we communicate with the businesses when we set up our contracts with them. So technically, you don't have to be dismissed. I would just recommend that you get dismissed and then by somebody, and also let your agency know as well, because that kind of changes how the billing looks and what we do on our end. But I would just do that as like good measure. But so on that note too, you want to make sure that when you are at a facility as an independent contractor, it's the business goes through the agency. So if you were there and say you do a doctor's appointment and they're going to have follow-up in 2 weeks and they ask if you're available, that's fine. And if you are, that's great. But I run into a lot of problems with businesses thinking the interpreters, they don't have to go through the agencies, they only have to go through the interpreters. So then interpreters say they're available and then we never get requests and then like no one gets billed or paid. So I would just recommend when you, I can't think of the right words here, when you go onto a job that you make it aware that everything goes through the agency to you. So you're not contracting with, say, Seton, you're contracting with us, so that information needs to come to us, right? So
we couldn't say that the doctor's office requested us again?
No.
Or
You could let us know, and hopefully they'll let us know too. What I'm just saying is you don't want to do it without us being involved, right? Because a lot of times you'll say you're available, and then the doctor's office won't call us again. And then when they don't have someone, or, because so you say you're available, they don't call us, so we don't confirm you, so then you don't know if it happens or not, you don't go, maybe, and then they call us and they're mad they don't have an interpreter. So
if we just tell the doctor or whoever saying, hey, are you available? We just say, yes, I am. Give my name to the agency, call, and then you back and say that.
yeah, that's perfect. Yep.
Nice and worded.
Yeah, no, that was
So professional sounding.
cover your ass.
There we go. I knew something your ass.
I'm sorry, yeah. CYA is cover your ass. I just recommend that you.
I thought it was called you.
Oh, you can CYA by CYA. You can cover your ass by
ACC has a 15-minute per hour policy. You have to wait. So for every hour of the class, you have to wait 15 minutes.
yeah, so we do that with 20 minutes, and then generally.
I have a question going back to billing. So since scheduling, like 1 week I might have, one assignment a day, so that's 7. And then some days I might, have like 5 or 6 assignments, and then the whole week I'll do like 20 assignments. So as you say, like the annual income of an interpreter fluctuates just by how much they accept or give back or do that. Like an interpreter's like salary isn't really set; it fluctuates.
Definitely. I think your salary probably depends on what you want it to be. So things out of your control would so you work with your agency to get your rates set up. And then from there, it's really how involved or how not involved you want to be. I mean, we have interpreters who only contract with us and only take work from us, and and that's that. Or we have interpreters who work with other agencies. So they're contracted with maybe 3 or 4 agencies, and so they're taking work from all of those avenues, you know. So it definitely depends on, you know, how available you are, how many agencies you're contracting with, and basically how much you want to work, you know. So you can basically not accept jobs if you aren't interested in taking them, and then if you want a really busy week and load it on up. I have an interpreter who takes everything. Everything. You know who I'm talking about. Everything. It doesn't mean, I don't even have to tell him job details. I'm not joking. I mean, I do. He gets a job, and it's all very, it's still policy, but I mean, he's just like ready to go and takes a lot of stuff, so it really just kind of depends on what you want it to be.
How far does negotiations go with setting your pay scale? Like, do you guys just off this what we're gonna offer you, that's it, or do we have any negotiation for ourselves?
Yes, and so my former boss would not be happy with using the word negotiation, but I would say there is. So I actually shouldn't have any insight to this process except that I do. So how that usually works is we will send an interpreter a set of rates based on their experience, the number of years, you know, they've been in the field, their certification level, and then we usually will send that to you, and then you can fill it out. Sometimes we send like blank rate sheets, and then interpreters can fill it out for their proposed rates and send it back. I wouldn't say it's a lot of negotiation. I'd say it's probably we suggest a rate, you offer a rate, and then we do once or twice around get settled.
Which is a negotiation.
Okay, so yeah. Yes.
And you can always set your rates way high. Just know that you're probably only going to get a job here and there when they absolutely can't find anybody else.
Yeah.
Or you can go on our new platform, Vinya, and set your own rates.
And every other interpreter on the planet can see it.
And that's not towards me, because I didn't actually make that feature myself, so I'm going to keep smiling and saying
So that a client could like look at how much they want to pay you for. I mean, how to what is
Other
that?
interpreters
I don't know what the client's going to see. I just know I can see
Yeah.
other
Oh,
interpreters.
No, say,
Okay.
can?
So yeah, in that platform you get a range for how much the job will be, but it's a little different because we take some of that.
Is it looked down upon if you do, like you mentioned, you have some interpreters that only work with your agency, and then you have some that you're working with 4 agencies? Is that looked down upon to be using different agencies, or is that just totally up to you?
No, yeah, that's acceptable. I'd say the only time it really gets looked down upon is if you are trying to get back work because something better comes into another agency. Otherwise, though, no hard feelings if you work with multiple agencies.
So is the agency's cut a percentage, or is that per assignment, or is that per interpreter? How does that work?
It's per assignment.
Is it a certain percentage, or is it like
It's hard to say. So we have like our general rates that we offer to new businesses, and then we also have contracted rates that get set up with account executives that I don't see. So it just kind of depends, but it's generally we set a rate, and that's how much we charge, and then it fluctuates how much we, I guess, profit or make.
right? But that
based
doesn't
on it.
affect mine because we've already
Right,
negotiated
right.
your
So if we set up rates for you, that is completely separate from what's happening with the business. We're doing our own thing with that. Yeah, so you can really just think of the agency and independent contractors like we are working together. We are the business, and you're just going out.
And is the whole like you're working with just like if an interpreter is just working for CSD versus working for a bunch of different agencies, is that communicated at the beginning onset of signing up with the agency, or is it
No,
just you
you don't
guys
have to
figure it out?
Yeah, I mean,
Okay.
if we call and you're like, oh, I have a job for CBH or something.
The contracts usually say that you're an independent contractor, therefore it's understood you work for other agencies, and we encourage that. Agencies encourage that, because if you work only for one agency, you could be called into the realm of employee-employer, and then they have to pay more taxes.
taxes? Or do you guys take out taxes, or are the independent contractors expected to manage their own taxes?
That's probably a better question for Lynn. I don't really
Independent
know.
contractors can handle all their own business, their own taxes. When you work for ACC or you work for Travis County, then you're a part-time employee, and they have different ways. They distinguish between the way they can stay, you have to stay at the whole job, no matter whether the student doesn't show up, because you're a part-time employee. So they have a different way to dictate your work than when you're an independent contractor. Technically, you set your own conditions, your own rates, and you're contracted out to them. But of course, you're going to abide by whatever policies they have established as best practices for their agency.
Interpreter's going to write off liability insurance that was required for a job.
Yep. And parking and all those.
Yep, parking. Yep. So do all that yourself.
So if so sorry, this is not on the topic of billing, but we'll go back. So we were talking about feedback that we give you guys from the assignment. What about feedback you get from consumers? Do we ever see that? Do you guys only see that? What happens with that stuff?
Yep, so generally I would say we'd probably provide that feedback. It kind of depends too on what the feedback is. Sometimes we get no lists, and that information we don't generally share. But
Which means no list means.
oh, I'm sorry. So the deaf consumer prefers not to have you, or you're not allowed to interpret them, or not. They don't want you to interpret them. So it's really we have requested lists from deaf consumers for interpreters they want, and then no lists for interpreters they don't want. And so that we generally would share with you. But for example, I had an interpreter on an ongoing job, and then I got feedback from the business that they no longer wanted that interpreter because of a punctuality issue. So that information we provided to the interpreter, and I think that's listed on here. If not, it was on one of my touch points. But another really good thing to keep in mind is just really do not take professional feedback personally. So if we do provide you that information, it's only to help you and to benefit you. It's not you were late and we don't want to work with you. Although for the record, it doesn't look good on us either. So keep that in mind because we will think that too. But yeah, so yeah.
We might have covered this a little bit, so I just kind of want to make sure that I answered it if we did. If there's a company and they say, hey, I want you to be, our official interpreter, like Monday through Friday, 8 to 5, it's like an everyday job, but I work for, this agency, I can say, I can absolutely do that for you, but you need to contact my agency, check with them, see if it's okay, and then it would be set up that way, or is that kind of like not what agencies want from an interpreter that way?
So the first part, yes, I would definitely say tell the business to request you when they place the request. And then so the part of being an independent contractor is being able to decide those things and make them look good for yourself. But I would say the best practice in that situation would just be to let both agencies know. So if you already have a couple of jobs, but you get an ongoing job for another agency, maybe call and just say, I have this opportunity. Are we able to work with it? If not, maybe take only the jobs that you can that you don't already have jobs for, which actually might be a better route since you've already kind of committed and been confirmed or whatever it is. But so, yeah, and you'll face a lot of stuff like that as an independent contractor. So, but I would say talk to your agencies. If you get offered something like that, I would contact them both and kind of see how they can work with you to get that all covered. So, if it's like a job for tomorrow, then I'll probably have a hard time covering it. Probably would be a better bet to say I can't do tomorrow, but I can do everything else. Versus if it's 3 weeks out, we say, I don't want to be in bad graces, but I kind of want to get this job back, so I have this ongoing job, or whatever it is. Just kind of talk with the agency and see, but also be mindful of, when the jobs are. And, some stuff you'll kind of get a feel for, some stuff just gets harder to fill. You'll see it in the pages than others.
So, have any situations ever shown up where the interpreter has been hired by a company through the agency, and then the company suggests that the interpreter drops the agency and works for them for maybe a slightly higher rate of pay?
That hasn't happened. I've been with CST for 8 months and I haven't had that happen. But
It's on your don't list.
Maybe I misunderstood. I'm sorry. What?
It's on the don't list too. I think I added it. Promote yourself privately by giving out your own business cards, same kind of thing.
I'm assuming that would be interpreter suicide.
Yeah, pretty much.
That or telling the business, which this is a true story, this has been happening, to request you next time if the deaf consumer didn't. Which I have an interpreter who is continuously doing that, and it is mind blowing us how in the world. But yeah, so I would also recommend don't do that.
Question. What percentage, as we're baby interpreters going out there newly certified, will we get jobs, or will they mostly go to the seasoned or professional, the other people who have been out